very much. Um, I've got a summary of the questions that were posed in the pre-registration questioning, and I'm going to be using that to sort of guide us through this webinar. But you will see that there is a place where you can type in comments or questions. So before we get everybody else on board, we've got 3 or 4 minutes before we're going to actually formally start our webinar. I want to give you the opportunity to type in any other questions or thoughts that have come to your mind since you registered. And one of the things that's really going to be helpful, I think, for all of us is that following this webinar, you will get a link to it. So it'll all be recorded. I believe it's recording now, so you'll even get this chit chat. You'll get a link to the webinar so you can listen to it again. Involve other people on the team in it if you like. If you're a practice manager, you may want to have your dentist involved, and if you're a dentist, you may want your practice manager or other members of your team involved in this. So it'll give you a good chance to review all of this kind of thing. You know, I'll just sort of, by way of introduction, some of you I met last year at Marketing Dentistry 2015. I'll be back again this year. I'll be back for the entire month of August, actually, in country. And I'm in the US right now. I've been here for quite a long time, but I've been to Australia 16 times. And over the years, I've gotten to know Aussies and Aussie culture and Aussie dentistry very, very well. And of course, you all know that circumstances and situations have changed in the last year or 2 or 3 or 4. And even, 10 or 15 years ago, things were quite different. The proliferation of corporate practices. Some of you participate with corporate practices. The proliferation of many foreign trained dentists who have come into the country and assumed practice in Australia has made the competition extremely difficult. And so one of the things we're going to be helping you to do, and this is the start of it with this particular webinar, we probably plan some more for you, is to help you figure out how to be more successful and more competitive in really, really challenging times where some of the rules have changed and things are not always the way they have been. And it's interesting to see all of you who have registered for this, because I've taken the opportunity to go online and look at your websites where they are and learn as much as I can about each one of you who registered, so that I can be a little bit more in tune with where you are and what your circumstances are. And some of you are very young. A couple of you are just starting out to practice. You're between positions. You're working part-time in a couple practices. Others of you have your own private practice. You've been working as a solo or maybe a partnership practice for many years. And so we're going to try to figure out how we're going to bring all of those circumstances together and talk about things that aren't gimmicky, that aren't fluff, but that are quite significant and real and lasting. The changes that we talk about, and when I talk about we, I'm talking about myself and Tracy Penn, my presentation partner in both Marketing Dentistry 2015 and 16, and also in Best Practice. What we try to help you look at and understand is that the kinds of change that you must implement in your practice, or adjustments or circumstances that you must put into your practice, have to be significant, not fancy, not fluff, not neon flashing signs, not gimmicks, not that kind of thing, because that stuff doesn't last. Maybe it's an initial kind of flash in the pan, but beyond that, that kind of change and modification doesn't really have meaning to people. And we're at our starting time, so I'm going to officially welcome all of you who are here with us on this webinar. I titled it, why is it so hard? Why is it so bloody hard? And as I've been involved in dentistry for 35 years, maybe a little bit more than that, and I have to tell you that the same questions were being asked in the 70s and the 80s. Why is it so hard? And I think one of the first things, I've got to give you a little bit of relief, I guess, in this area, a little bit of pause. there are not a lot of businesses where the owner of the business is simultaneously the means of production. You know, even in medical practices, most of them are groups. They're owned by um, a consortium of either medical or non-medical people, corporate ownership. And those corporate ownerships take care of all of the um, day-to-day issues of the practice. They have professional practice managers who are trained and competent to run hospitals and surgery centers and all of that kind of thing, so that the clinicians can walk in the door, usually the back door or the side door in the morning, glove up and get to work doing whatever it is the actual patient care is all about. Um, you know, when you think about an automobile manufacturer, or when you think about other kinds of large businesses where there's somebody doing the work, but the owner is the one who has oversight of everything. Dentistry is almost unique. There are other professions that are similar to that, to this, where the owner is simultaneously the primary means of production. But that's exactly where you are. If you're a private practice, you're a very small business, you know, X number of small number of employees, and you own the business, you be the business. There we go. And simultaneously, you've got to get in that surgery every day, and you've got to produce the business. So I want to give yourself a little bit of a break here, because that makes it especially tough. And that's what leads me into some of the concepts that I want to talk with you about. Because as I reviewed the questions that you posed ahead of time, a lot of them came from an omission that I see in many dental practices, that if that omission were to be taken care of, a lot of these issues you're raising in your questions and what you've said. Oh, good. Hi, Frank. You can hear me. Thank you. I'm just reading the notes that you're sending to me, typing to me as you come along. A lot of those problems could be solved if we had the right team in place. So think about this a little bit, running your practice as a three-legged stool. If you're a monopod, you're responsible for every aspect of the practice, the clinical production, overseeing in the management, taking care of all patient relationships, keeping the business healthy, overseeing all the inventory and the stocking and the money, and making sure the bills are paid and all that kind of stuff. That's a really big ask for someone who has significant clinical obligations. So what some practices have done, not all, but some, and sometimes not as well as it should be, is that they have put on board a practice manager. Well, I want to talk about this notion of a practice manager for a moment. Sip of coffee. In many cases, and I'm going to probably accept all of the ones of you who are on the phone now, because you're obviously functioning at a different level. In many cases, the practice manager is the most senior receptionist. Rarely does the practice manager, other than in a very, very large practice or a very corporate run practice, rarely does the practice manager in the kind of practices that Tracy and I go into have formal training in management, formal training in human relations, formal training in how to manage accounts and that kind of thing, and work with the chart accountant and the attorneys and all of that kind of stuff. Rarely does the practice manager have significant authority in important areas where he or she really ought to be able to function on a day-to-day basis. And so practice manager tends to mean brush fire putting out person on a day-to-day basis, which is really not taking care of the kind of things that need to be taken care of that end up making it so hard. So what is a proper practice manager when you think about it? It's someone who has, this is not about chronological age, but there's no question that with chronological age often comes experience and wisdom. A proper practice manager is someone who has some maturity that comes with experience and wisdom. That person has real clarity about what you as the dentist are trying to accomplish. Okay, let's see. Somebody's saying they have no sound. All right, Tony's taking care of it. Thank you. The practice manager is someone who has very clear understanding of what the dentist has hired him or her to help with. And when you think about it, the practice manager probably isn't in charge of any of the clinical dimensions, clinical standard of care, how long the dentist takes for an appointment, how much the dentist should charge for his or her fees, whether the dentist is getting continuing education, what the standard of care is, overseeing the clinical performance of the surgical staff, the nurses, and so on. That's probably and should be outside of the range of what a practice manager ought to be handling. But think about the management of day-to-day operations of the practice. Those things that have to happen for the practice to carry on a day-to-day basis and do it very, very well, and do it at a level that marshals resources, handles resources wisely and very, very well, and make sure that really scarce practice resources are used optimally. So what you want to think about is, and I talked about this example in our morning session, think about the things that are very distressing and disturbing to you. You're in, the patient is there, and the laboratory case has not been returned. Where is it? I don't know. When did it go out? Who did it go to? When was it supposed to be back? How much time do we have to have for this patient? Oh my goodness, the patient is here and the crowns aren't here or the bridges aren't here. That's the kind of thing that requires a system. That kind of system is not rocket science. It's not hard to come up with that kind of system. But somebody has to do it. Somebody has to implement it. Somebody has to oversee it. Somebody has to manage it. Somebody has to review it. Somebody has to make sure that every single other member of the team understands the system and is accountable to the system. Now, either that's you as the dentist or as a practice manager. What would you want the practice manager to do? Understand the standard with which you want things to be done, create the best possible system that uses the least amount of steps and resources in order to accomplish the goal that you want for something as simple as laboratory work coming in and out of your practice. When you think about it, there are a myriad of systems that could be and probably should be put in place in many practices in order to ensure that the operations are smooth. Another example, how many times do people leave the surgery and walk out the front door without stopping with the accounting staff and taking care of their accounts, or making the next appointment, or following up, or any number of things like that? Those kinds of functions in a dental practice need to have someone who's there to be able to see, to observe, to look, to watch, to stay on top of those things. And it can't be you as the dentist, because you need to be back in that surgery making tooth dust, changing what's going on in people's mouths, and doing what only you, the clinician, can do. So the practice manager has to have clarity about what you want and need to have help with. The practice manager also has to have training. The practice manager has to have authority. You can't micromanage practice managers. You have to give them a context in which to operate, guidelines, permissions. You may do this, you may not do that, but within what you must do, they've got to have the authority to act, to follow up, to modify, to make changes, and to hold other people on the team accountable. So they have to have authority, they have to have responsibility, they have to have accountability, they have to be clear about the parameters within which they could work. That's the second stool, the leg on the three-legged stool. Without someone to oversee day-to-day operations, you end up having to do it or it doesn't get done at all. And that's one of the things that makes it so hard. But there's a third leg of this three-legged stool. And that's a role that I call, and I see Bernie's on the line with us. She's a practice coordinator. She's a patient facilitator, a patient coordinator. Her role in her dentist practice is to manage ongoing patient relationships. So that involves, listen, in many cases, this is a full-time position. In smaller practice, this position is shared with reception. Ideally, in almost any practice, other than the tiniest practice, it's wonderful to have a practice coordinator, patient coordinator, a facilitator who can spend full time focusing on patient relationships. Because I'm telling you, that is where growth comes from. It doesn't come from anything else. Yes, you market. Yes, you advertise. Yes, you do all kinds of things to help your practice grow. But if you don't have someone to manage and support those patients once they get into your practice, if patients are falling off the cliff, they're falling through the cracks, if details about their care are forgotten and not followed up with, then you've spent money, time, and resources on marketing and advertising and your gorgeous website and all of those things you do, only to have opportunities lost. So what does a patient facilitator do? The patient facilitator is responsible for ongoing patient relationships. Ideally, that person would respond to the telephone call when a new patient calls, to try to come to the best possible understanding of why that patient is called, why that patient has called you now, what that patient is hoping you can help them accomplish. That person is also ideally involved in all of the initial phases of patient care, which means that when that patient comes in for their first appointment, uh, the facilitator is there, engages with the patient, reviews things like medical and dental history, experiences, expectations, all of those things. And then that patient facilitator becomes and stays the bridge between you and that patient throughout the entire patient lifetime relationship. That patient facilitator ideally is involved with you as you do the examination, the diagnostic process, the treatment planning, the case presentation, the consultation, the discussion about fees and finances, because we don't want the doctor doing that. You're probably not very good at it. And that patient facilitator stays engaged with that patient all the way through. Several of you asked questions about staying connected with patients once they've been into your practice. Well, it's very hard for somebody to stay connected with a patient if they were never connected with the patient in the first place. So think about this. If Jane has been the facilitator in your practice and I'm the patient, and I talked with Jane on the phone, and I was with Jane and you during the initial examination process, and Jane helped translate what you had to say so that I could understand it better as a non-clinical person. If Jane also helped me discuss options that you laid out and the implications of those options in lay terms, I mean, as simple as Sandy, there are several ways to take care of a missing tooth. One is to do nothing, of course, and I don't think that's what you said you want, but we should point out that that's an option for you. The other involves something that is removable, a partial denture that would come in and out and fill in that gap. That's probably the least costly, but there are implications of that. And you've told me that you didn't like the idea of something coming in and out, but we certainly want you to know that that is an option if you choose it. The other two options are something that don't come in and out. They're different. One would be an implant, which is a fake root on top of which a fake tooth is placed. And the other option is a bridge, which uses the teeth on either side to make that span complete by filling in the gap with a fake tooth. Um, so the doctor has outlined those three options. And so let's you and I talk about what you think would work best for you, and then we can discuss what the costing would be for that. That's the kind of very lay focused conversation that a patient facilitator would have with a patient. Um, then they discuss fees and financing. We want the patient to feel comfortable with that facilitator, patient coordinator, and have a private place to have that conversation, by the way, wherever possible. We want the level of comfort to be so high that the patient is able to say to the facilitator, I'd really love to do X, Y, or Z, but my husband just lost his job, or my wife is ill, or whatever the personal circumstance is, that often is private and people don't really want to blast too much about it, but in confidence be able to tell you and your practice what the concern is, what the issue is. So that the facilitator has that level of professional intimacy with the patient. And the facilitator can either help the patient address that issue, offer a way into it if it's clinically viable and acceptable to the dentist, or stay connected with that patient until things change. I say this all the time. Patient circumstances change. We hope they'll change for the better. You know that there are people who feel like, okay, today, yes, I can do this. I can take this on and I'm going to make the appointment and I'm going to do this dentistry. But they go home and something in their life has changed. They become ill. Their spouse becomes ill. Their children need something. Something comes up in school or someone loses their job. That change will have an impact on their comfort in continuing on with some dental care sometimes. So we don't want to lose the connection with that patient when that happens. Because when those circumstances change yet again, and they almost always do, and they almost always change not for anything that has to do with us, but for something that has to do with them. They get a small inheritance. Their husband gets a job again. The wife becomes well and is able to care for herself now, or whatever it is. Those things change. We want that patient to feel really safe, really confident, really comfortable coming back to Jane, the patient facilitator, and saying, look, things have changed. My circumstances are different. I tell this story all the time because it's just such a classic story of how this actually happens. This was a true story. I was in Hamilton, Ontario, many, many years ago, and there was a patient who, some of you are too young to even know who Mrs. Nikita Khrushchev was, but she was she was the wife of the Russian premier in the 60s. And she was this little round, those little stack dolls, those Russian stack dolls? Well, she was one of that, but no color. That's who she was. And she was in the chair. She had these really lower crowded anteriors. There was no way she could even get any floss between them. And it was very difficult for her to clean her mouth. And the hygienist was saying to her at the time, we could do some minor tooth movements, some orthodontics, and change all of that. So it'd be much easier for you to clean your mouth, and it would look even a little bit better if you wanted that. Oh no, she said, I just couldn't possibly do that. Couldn't possibly do that. And she just brushed it all off. Well, 6 months later, I'm back in the practice doing a follow-up visit. And I see Mrs. Nikita Khrushchev, not her real name, her name on the roster of the patients coming in that day. And she was in for an orthodontic appointment. I was shocked. And when I talked with her, she wasn't a little round babushka doll with no color anymore. She had her hair done. She had, I tell this is so true, she had polka dots on. They were not really nice, but it was different, right? So she had all of this She had some makeup on, her hair was done. She looked really nice except for the polka dots. And I introduced myself to her again. I said, "You remember me?" Yes, I remember you. You were the last time I was here. So I said, "I must comment on how your appearance has changed and that you're here for orthodontics. And I remember when I was here before, you just thought, oh, that was nothing you could ever do." Well, I said, to help me understand that, because I wanted to know what had changed. Had they talked her into the ortho or what? And she said, oh, yes, things have changed very much. I said, how? She said, he died. I said, who died? My husband, she said, he died. I said, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. That's so very sad. She said, yeah, he was a really nice man, but he was just a stingy son of a gun. She said he wouldn't part with a nickel if he had to get himself out of a locked room. And she said, it's interesting. When he died, I discovered I was a wealthy woman. And so one of the first things I did was I called up doctor and said, I want those braces. And here she was getting braces because she decided when she had control of money herself, she would spend it on something that was important to her. Now, this practice could have talked with her for months and months and months and never compelled her to get ortho because she couldn't clean well between her teeth. But they did address it each time she was in. They would say to her, I understand it's not at the top of your list. I also want to just continue to remind you that the crowding of these teeth down here will continue to make it hard for you to clean it. I'm going to do the best I can today, and if things change, you let us know. Well, they did change, and she let them know. And she let them know through that patient facilitator who was connected with her throughout that whole process. I want for your practice, for you to have someone who's so connected with patients in a professionally intimate way that when patients' circumstances change, they come to you. They take advantage of what you have to offer and what you've been recommending. That patient facilitator is a key person, and that's the third leg of the stool. You as the clinical oversight manager, the patient facilitator as patient relationships oversight manager, making sure absolutely every patient is heard and understood and cared for in the best possible way. And the third leg is the practice administrator, the practice manager, whatever you want to call that person, who maintains oversight for non-clinical, non-patient relationship issues in the practice. All of those things that are really important to be handled so that you can focus on clinical issues. Why is it so hard? It's so hard because you're having to do so much as the clinician, or your practice manager is having to do so much, and sometimes not with a lot of authority. I want to point out to you, and I'm going to get my dates here so that I say all the dates correctly for you, that I mentioned to you that I'm going to be back in Australia this year doing with my friend Tracy Penn for Marketing Dentistry 2016. And I want to just let you know the topic that we're going to be focusing on, because, and Tracy and I chose this topic because it is of prime significant and importance to many of you. And that's the title of our program is the Excellent Practice Manager. We are inviting dentists and their practice managers or practice managers in training to join us for a full day. And I'm going to give you the dates. We'll give this to you as well in a follow-up email. We're going to be in Sydney on August 13th. We're going to be in Brisbane on Wednesday, the 17th of August, and Melbourne on the 20th of August. One full day in each of these three cities where we're going to talk about developing a structure and an approach to practice management with authority, training, responsibility, accountability, all those things that I've talked about. Because without a strong practice manager, the dentist is having to do way too much. last year at Marketing Dentistry 2015, Tracy and I learned from many of the practice managers that they want desperately to have more responsibility and accountability, but they don't always have the structure. They don't have the permissions. They don't have the authority that they need to do all of that. And so that's why we decided this year we would, I lost, okay. We decided that this year we would really focus on having all of the dentists and their practice managers join us so we could help them put together a blueprint for each unique individual practice. Each group of dentist practice manager are going to leave with a different structure. You're going to put it together yourself with our help so that you end up with a practice manager who has training, clarity, authority, responsibility, accountability, all those things you need so that we can help make it easier for you to be the clinician and more fulfilling for the practice manager to do his or her job. I also want to point out to you that we do have a special discount code for Marketing Dentistry 2016. Early bird registration for this program ends on the 29th of May. That's coming up pretty quickly. A little bit later for me by 14 hours than you, but still pretty quickly. There's a $150 early bird discount, and if you use another discount code, Sandy Webinar 50, SANDY WEBINAR 50, you'll get an additional $50. So it's a total of $200 reduction in your tuition. And that information is going to be sent to you as well. So I'm going to encourage all of you, if you've not registered to come, to really seriously think about joining us. Having your practice manager, or if you're a practice manager, getting your dentist to come along with you so that we can help you form this. So here's the summation of this opening part, and then I'm going to open this up for comments and questions from those of you who are on with us. It's so hard if you're the dentist because you're having to do too much. Because systems and structures and processes are not in place. They could be. They're not overseen. They're not managed to the extent that they could be. And without really good people around you, it's extremely hard for all of this to function at the level you need it to function at in order to offer the kind of clinical services that you really want to focus on yourself. Now, I think I've been told that I can allow people to raise their hand. Let's see if we can do this. If you have a comment or a question, raise your hand. I think over here on the side of this little box here, there's a little emoji at the bottom, and I think you can raise your hand, and then I think I can allow you to talk and ask a question, and then I will do my best to respond to it. I have other questions you all posed in advance, but I wanted to give the participants an opportunity to do that. So is there anybody who would like to ask a question at this point, or make a comment, or whatever it is that works best for you? Let me just take a moment so I can allow people to pipe up or pipe in if they want. Hey, John Paul, nice to see you on here. Jackie is back. She was on the morning session, or the afternoon, the morning session as well. Very good. Oh, Denise DeLupo, my friend. Marvelous dental hygienist. You're lucky to have her. Hi. All right. Well, anytime you wish, you can either type in a question or you can raise your hand and I'll look for it, and I think I can open it up. So here's somebody. Tony's asking a question. Let's see if I can do audio. Did I do that right? Tony, are you able to talk? All right. This is not my area of expertise, folks. That's why we have to have specialists here. I'm not sure that I'm doing this correctly. So, Tony, I think I'm doing it the way I was told, but maybe I'm technologically. All right. I'm back to listen only here, so we'll have to just go with that. If you have comments or questions, I would love for you to type them in. And in the meantime, I'm going to go back to some of the questions that were posed by you all in advance. One of the things that came up time and again in your questions in advance and the comments that you sent to me was about distinctiveness. That's my word. But basically, the question was, how do we compete with everybody else out there? All right. How do we compete with the advertising people, with the big groups, with the discount dentists, with all of that kind of stuff? And, that's a question that's plagued dentistry for a long time. There's an old story uh, about a barber who was a small town barber. He was in a nice little uh, country town, and he was the only barber in town, and he gave wonderful haircuts. He charged $10 for his haircuts, and people came to him and him only because he was the only one there. One day he came to work to open up his barber shop, and he saw that across the street another barber had opened up, and the barber had a big sign up there that said $6 haircuts. Well, the barber was crestfallen because all of his customers were walking across the street to get a $6 haircut. So he called in a panic to his marketing person and said, I don't know what to do. I'm losing all my business. I'm losing all my business. The marketing guy said, don't worry about it. Come back tomorrow morning. I will have solved this problem. Next morning, when the barber came to work, he saw that there was a new sign over his shop. And the sign said, we fix $6 haircuts. So I want you to think about that. I'm not sure you can put a sign out that says, we fix really bad dentistry, but you can behave in that way. You can offer complimentary second opinions. You can compete on a different level with a higher level of personal care and personal service, and that is what makes you distinctive. Certainly you can be distinctive by having beautiful rooms. But at a certain point, having rooms that look like the Taj Mahal or something like that are so over the top that they're offsetting for people. Your rooms have to be clean, they have to be organized, they have to be very appealing, they have to be just maybe one step up from what people are experiencing at home. You can't have any more, and one of the things I did was I went out and I looked at everybody's website, people who registered for this program. Not all of you have a website, and not all of you have a website that I was able to find or get to, but in many cases there were pictures of your reception area, your lounge, and your rooms. In some cases they're just chairs all around the corner around the perimeter of the room. There has to be some style. It can't look like the motor vehicle department. It has to be warm and welcoming. It has to be somewhere where people are comfortable. Okay, Bernie Simler says, after many years in my role, I strongly encourage principal dentists not to attend this life-changing seminar alone. Thank you. Please take your principal's staff member. You cannot do it alone. Bernie is absolutely right. You've got to have good people around you, and they've got to be invested in your future and their future as well. They've got to be really, really well trained. So thank you for that comment, Bernie. I totally agree with you, as you know. So I'm going back to this issue of distinctiveness. You have to be distinctive in ways that are meaningful and lasting to people. If you give people a coffee mug, this is one of these insulated things that I got for something I do as a volunteer. These are very, very nice, and it keeps my ice fresh because we Americans, we like ice a lot. It's a very, very nice thing to have, but it's not lasting for me. At some point, this is going to go in the dishwasher and it's going to break and it's not going to work any longer, and I'm going to toss it away. and I'm going to look for another thing to put my water and my ice in. Whatever you're doing has to be meaningful and lasting. Now, what is that? It's knowing this patient, staying connected with this patient, making sure that you don't mess up stuff with this patient. We can't have people coming into our practice when we weren't expecting them, or having one expectation that we're not prepared to meet. Um, when you offer second opinions, this is it helps you learn what not to do, by the way. So the patient comes in for a second opinion and they say, I went into this practice and my last dentist, and I have this problem up here. And then I ended up with this $20,000 treatment plan, and they never addressed this issue here. Seriously, seriously. People move on because they're not heard, they're not listened to, they're not responded to. It's really important for you to create a group of people around you who coalesce around these patients, who make you distinctive in ways that are meaningful to patients. Yes, you want to have very nice, attractive rooms, but it's more important for them to be clean, for people to be orderly, to not forget things, to not be frenetic, to not be looking at each other and trying to figure out who made this appointment. Patient came in on the wrong day. I didn't make that appointment. Did you make that appointment? Forget that. Solve the problem. It's the way in which people think about how they handle day-to-day matters. See, this is why it's important for you to have these people around you. You're in the surgery, you're doing dentistry for someone. A patient has come in on the wrong day. It's a 90-year-old. You don't want this patient to go home. What's your standard? How do you want this to be handled? Somebody brought this 90-year-old in. It's the wrong day. They were supposed to be here tomorrow. You want people who can problem solve, who can figure out, can we do something today? How can we handle this? How do we minimize the aggravation factor for other patients? How do we treat this patient so well that the caretaker goes back and tells everybody else about how beautifully you handled something when, oh my goodness, indeed, we read the card wrong. We are supposed to come tomorrow. You want those day-to-day events, all kinds of things. Go back and do an inventory of the kinds of unexpected situations and circumstances that arise in normal day-to-day operations. How many of them come to you, excuse me, doctor, we've got 3 problems here for you to solve. We know you're in the middle of a implant placement, but I've got Mrs. Jones on the phone. She wants to know if she needs to be pre-medicated. And then this other person called and her bill is wrong and she wants to know if you'll write this. I mean, all that kind of stuff. It's crazy making. So what's distinctive? Mature, cool, calm, responsible, accountable people who are in the mode of, I don't care who made the problem, how do we fix it so the patient is well served? It's a mindset and an attitude that has to permeate everyday operations in the practice. The clinical coordinator or the practice manager is responsible for making sure that supplies, inventory, equipment is there working really, really well every time you need it, whenever you need it, that we don't have more supplies and inventory that it's costing us more than it ought to, but we don't have too few of items so that all of a sudden we come up and we don't have a lower flange drifter or whatever the thing is. Those kinds of being on top of those things, having responsibility and accountability and clear lines of obligation for people are part of what make you distinctive. We want people to come into our practice knowing that what's been promised is going to happen, and that they're going to leave better than they came and happy they chose your practice. Bernie says the patients will tell other people of their experiences, does its own advertising. People love to feel listened to. Absolutely correct. You want people leaving your practice saying, wow, I expected this, I got that, and now I'm going to tell people around you. What's the least expensive form of marketing and advertising? Happy patients. Happy patients. Patients who are happy to talk about you online, patients who are happy to tell their friends, who send their relatives, who sit in reception with other people that they may or may not know and talk about how well served they are. People who, as they're walking through the lounge on the way out the front door, turn around and say, thank you so much. That was terrific. You guys are great. So that other people in reception can hear that. That's absolutely what you want to have happening all the time. And it's very possible, but you can't have that when you've got a one person at the reception, head down, trying to do all of these things at once when there are patients there who want and need to be serviced at a different level. Here's the trap for you as the dentist. It's really easy for you to get fixed on quantifiable variables. How much money did we take in today? How many new patient appointments did we get? How many recall appointments scheduled? How many review of findings did we do with people? How much did we book today? How much money got scheduled on the appointment? Have we met our daily goal? It's really easy for you to focus on that kind of stuff. Let me know the numbers, that kind of thing. And it's easy for you to do that because it's something you can wrap your hands around. The problem with that is that it drives your particularly reception staff into doing those kinds of things. Think about this. At the end of the day, I come to you and I say, Doctor, I did a really good job today. I made these phone calls. I put this much money in the bank. I booked this many appointments. I got these insurance things in. I opened these number of pieces of mail. I got whatever this stack is down from there to there. And whew, I did a really good job. See? It's really easy for me to do that for you. And you're going to feel good about it because you've got some sense that I've accomplished something. And are those things important? Of course they are. But here's what you can't envision as clearly, and that's the quantitative issues in your practice. How many patients left feeling understood? How many patients left feeling better than they came in? How many patients left with a heightened sense of wanting to talk about you to their friends and neighbors and to tell them what a wonderful experience they've had in your practice? How many people leave saying, you know what, that dentist offered me a lot of options that were reasonable, affordable for me, or they found a way for me to take care of it in a way that passes my financial issues, or I feel confident going back to them again. How many people leave with their needs met and feeling really cared for, understood, paid attention to? I can't tell you the 9 people who left that way. It's not the way things work, but it is what matters. What matters is when people leave better than they came, and people leave feeling like they made a great decision to choose you as their dentist. That's what distinctiveness is all about, and it's very easy. Doctor, or this is what Denise is saying. Doctor, I did a really good job. A patient felt comfortable enough to have a cry and say that it's so nice to be in a place that understands I now am ready to put myself first and I'm ready to commit to my own health. Denise, thank you. That was my day today. Good for you, Denise. Denise, I've known for a long time. She's another American. She's a dental hygienist, and I think Denise has been in Australia for 25 years, maybe longer than that, and worked in a number of really spectacular practices. And that that's what she's saying. Look, this is what I did today. I got a connection. I maintained a connection with a patient who was able to say, yes, it's time for me. And she's there to shepherd that patient through to you and make that connection to you as the clinician. That's not, good memory, 25 years, right? That's that's what matters. That's what grows your practice. I say to people all the time, if you spend $1 on marketing and advertising and promoting your practice, and you get a X number of patients in the front door, but the systems and the structures and the internal operations of your practice are so loose, so flabby, so inattentive, so haphazard that the back door is open and patients are leaving out of the back door or never coming around or not thinking of you to come back, then you've wasted that dollar on marketing and promotion and advertising. You really have to have internal operations that cradle these patients through their relationship process. I mentioned this with folks this morning on our webinar at 7 a.m. Some people got up for that. If I were to walk down the street in Hampton or Brisbane or wherever you are and happen upon a patient that you hadn't seen in your practice for 2.5 years maybe, and I said to that patient, I'm looking for a dentist. Who do you go to? 9 times out of 10, they will say your name. They still consider you to be their dentist. Now, do they attend regularly? No, but a lot of patients don't. We got to get over this idea that they got to come regularly. They come when they're compelled to seek your care. Why do patients seek your care? Because something in their life is not working right. The quality of their life is impaired by something in here. They think it's dentistry and they think you have a solution. We want to be receptive to those people when in 2 years or 3 years their circumstances change, their issues change, their needs change, and they feel like that they can come back to you, be warmly welcomed, and not shamed for having stayed away. It matters how we ask certain questions. Mrs. Jones, tell me about the last time you were to see a dentist. That's a different kind of question then. Do you go to the dentist regularly? Do you see a dentist every 6 months? The latter is an open question that invites people to tell you their story. When you ask it that way and you make it safe enough for people to talk with you, they will say to you, I haven't been in a very long time. And they will tell you all the reasons. I put my children first, my husband's been ill, I had other issues, whatever it is. Pass those by. Say, well, tell me what's prompted you to come now. Something, because the assumption is that something has changed and you want to be responsive to whatever that change is in that patient. That's different than, well, do you go to the dentist every 6 months? Do you see a dentist regularly? That's a shaming kind of a thing. And when people feel ashamed or shamed, they are resistant, they're reluctant, and they don't want to come back to you. What you don't ever want is for you to talk with a patient about, get this dentistry done. If you don't do this, the dreaded root canal, you need these crowns, the amalgams are going to break, blah, 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 because you want to do the dentistry. And years later, when something does break, people are embarrassed or afraid to come back to you because they don't want to be told, I told you so. They don't want to be embarrassed. They don't want to have to justify why they did things. You want people to be able, years maybe from now, to come back to your practice and say, times were tough. They've gotten a little better, and this tooth is broken. Can you help me with that now? And have you say, well, of course we can. We're very happy to do that. Let's have a look and see what it's looking like now. So Distinctiveness is really all about the way we connect with and work with these patients who are in our care. I know we would love to have, oh, let's see, Lisa is saying they don't want to be judged. Building trust and rapport is important. Lisa is absolutely spot on here. People do not want to be judged. And when they feel judged, they will resist us, won't they, Lisa? They will go away. They will not uh, subject themselves to our scrutiny and our judgment and all of that. They will go someplace else. And they will start all over again. And sometimes they will, in order to protect themselves, they will tell stories maybe that aren't entirely true. I mean, you know that people who come to you and say, look, my teeth are terrible because when I had my children, they took all the calcium out of my teeth, right? Now, I don't think that there's any scientific evidence that that's the case, but when you hear that sort of defensiveness, what you can pretty much take to the bank is that they're embarrassed. They feel ashamed. They, at some part in their brain, they have an awareness that they have neglected themselves, that they should have, but they didn't. And once they sort of put themselves out there by just simply opening their mouth and letting you go in, that has to be really treated with gentle, gentle hands. So when they say, when I had my children, they took all the calcium out of my teeth, you know, don't give them the latest lecture and the literature says that's bogus or whatever it is. Just say, oh, well, let's talk about uh, where you are now and what we can do to help you. So, what are the issues that concern you that you want us to pay attention to? What would you like the doctor to help you with? And let's see what we can do for you. So, Lisa is absolutely right. People will. This is such an important thing, and I bet you know this, Lisa. People are predisposed to liking you and trusting you. You see, nobody's going to go into a practice where they think the dentist or the staff is uh, bitches of the universe or mean or hurtful or whatever it is. If they've heard that about you, they're not going to come. They're going to go someplace else. They come into their practice, they expose themselves to you with the belief that you're going to help them, that you're going to be kind, that you're going to be receptive to their circumstances and their situation. They want that to be true. So in some ways, those initial parts are part of the audition. And if anything that's said or done is disarming of that predilection to trust, if it erases that tendency to choose you, I say to people all the time, people want you to be the one, don't screw it up. Don't screw it up. If anybody, even inadvertently, does something to mess that up, you lost a hugely important opportunity. You know what? A lot of what Tracy and I talk about, and Denise and Bernie certainly have experience because I've worked with both of them over all of these many, many years in their practices, is that um, there are no gimmicks that fix practices. There just aren't. There are no quick and easy answers to make a practice better. There's no snake oil. There's no magic potion out there that's going to fix your practice and make it all easier. You have to be invested in the quality and the care of what you provide as a dentist. You have to be invested in getting the right people around you, giving them permission, authority, training, responsibility, and accountability. You have to be invested in ensuring that everything that happens in your practice is about honoring the patient. They're your customer, for goodness sake. Honoring that patient, making sure that patient is heard, understood, that his or her needs are being met in the best possible way. We can't get into this roller coaster. I know that there are many practices out there that build on volume. I suppose you could engage in a race to the bottom, but I don't think that's sustainable for very long, because once you work through that volume, you need more volume. So you're constantly churning people through to try to pick off the easy fruit, and the long-term relationships don't survive all of that. So it is antithetical. In order to grow, sometimes you have to slow it down. In order to grow, sometimes you have to focus more precisely. In order to grow, sometimes you have to invest certain things in your practice in advance of that whole process. It's it's counterintuitive at a certain level, but yet it makes perfect sense at another level. Your investment, I put to you, has to be in yourself and your clinical skills, and making sure that you are on top of those and you're offering the absolute best possible thing you can do given the frame of services that you choose to offer. That's your responsibility as a clinician. And simultaneously, to look at having your three-legged stool in place, where you've got someone to maintain oversight of day-to-day business and practice operations, so you don't have to, but who's accountable to you and works within the guidelines and the parameters you've established, and simultaneously someone who manages those ever important and ongoing patient relationships. Whatever happened to Mrs. Jones? Let me check in with her. People who know your patients, who know you and your clinical standard, and people who maintain follow-up and connection with people without berating them and judging them. We're getting really close to the end of our hour, and I'm quite happy to stay on a little bit longer. I want to make sure. He says, thank you for getting up so early. You're very welcome. This talk is going to be available on a link, and I believe the link is an audio and a video link, Denise, so you can share this with your dentist if your dentist is not part of all of this. There will be a follow-up for all of this, and the follow-up is going to have the link to this broadcast, and it may have a link to the morning one where I've talked about similar things but in a bit of a different way. It's also going to remind you of the dates of Marketing Dentistry 2016. I'll just review them. We're going to be in Sydney on 13 August, Brisbane on 17 August, and Melbourne on the 20th of August this year. Tracy Penn and I will be doing a very intense full-day program intended for dentist and practice manager to come together to hone and sharpen and create a blueprint for how the practice manager will function in the practice. I hope all of you will join us. There is a special discount code for you that will, it's Sandy Webinar 50. Please, if you're going to come, register before the 29th, because that's the end of the early bird, and we'd like for you to be able to come and make sure that you have every financial advantage for doing so and bringing all the people who need to be joining us. I'm going to just check one more time and see if there are other comments or questions any of you would like to pose. I'm very happy, as I said, to stay on a little bit longer for anything else that's come up for you, so I'll wait and see if there are any questions. I think I'm going to try to open this audio, but I'm not sure I can do that. I tried that, so let's see if anybody has anything they wish to say or comments or questions. In doing that, I want to tell you, Tony, okay, Tony has said discount code is Sandy Webinar 50. You receive an extra $50 off the Marketing Dentistry early bird offer, so I hope you'll take advantage of that. Tracy and I also have a oh, good. Somebody has a question. I'm going to give you a voice. It's somebody on their cell phone. Hello. Can you hear me? All right, I have to do this. It didn't quite work. Somebody on a cell phone, on a mobile phone, had a question. I'm going to try again to give you voice and see. Oh, I'm so not good at this, guys. You know, there are certain things that you're good at and certain things you're not, and this is not one of them. So I'm not sure who it is that's on the mobile phone, but have another try at raising your hand and let me see one more time if I can give you the microphone to ask your question. All right, I think that's not worked. My apologies. I'm going to be doing some more of these webinars on different topics over the next several months. Um, I was mentioning to you that Tracy Penn and I have started a program, a practice transformation mastery continuum that extends over an 18-month period. It brings me back to Australia every 6 months to work with a select group of practices. Tracy, I mean, Bernadette said, Bernie says the only thing I'm not good at, several things. Automobile repair is one, and this is another one. So thank you, Bernie. Um, I can certainly chat with you all about that if you're interested in something that's really a soup to nuts, full exploration of everything in your practice, other than clinical things and running the technical parts of this. Um, if that's uh, if that's it for today, I will let you get on. I know it's 8 o'clock your time. I think it's 8 o'clock your time. Yep. And you may have children or settling in or whatever it is. Um, I love it. Denise is mentioning when she came. Oh, you're welcome, John Paul. So, very nice to see you. How important is a website? Anyone hear the questions? Very important. My friends at IDM do wonderful websites, and I think websites are very important. As I've been looking at people's websites, listen, websites are not my area of expertise, but boy, I sure know a good one when I see it, and I know when that doesn't work when I see it. I think that certainly online and social media becomes more and more important with younger people. So, um, Frank says, thank you very much for your time. Dinner time now. I will enjoy my breakfast. Thank you very much, Frank Fairley. It was a pleasure to have you. Any other comments? I'm going to just read them as we go. I'm not certain. I think maybe all of you can see these comments as well. Um, I want to thank you all for joining. It's been a pleasure to be with you. I look forward to another time, I hope, having more of you join us. And certainly think about coming to Marketing Dentistry 2016. It would be a pleasure to have you in person. Great presentation, Pamela. Thank you so much with that little smiley face there. So good evening to all of you. Pleasure. I will have a great day, Lisa. Thank you. I can't wait to see you. I'll be back actually in July, end of July, first part of August, and working with as many of you as possible. So uh, I'll follow up. Thank you so much for your time, everybody. Have a good evening, and I look forward to the next time we get together here. Bye-bye.